Alright, so in this video, we're going to see how to solve quadratic inequalities. So a quadratic inequality is going to be an inequality with the highest exponent of 2. So let's say we had x squared minus 9 is greater than or equal to 0. The first thing that I want to do is find some way to factor this left side so that I can find the roots of this quadratic equation. So if I take x squared minus 9, I know that these are both perfect squares and I need to find square roots. So the square root of x squared is going to be x, and the square root of 9 is going to be 3. So I'm going to use x and 3. Now since this is a difference of squares, I need to put a minus and a plus in between. So I'm going to start off with a minus, and then I'm going to use a plus. But I keep the x and the 3 the same. So now that I've factored the left side, I want to bring down the inequality symbol, that greater than or equal to, and the 0 that's on the other side. So now that I have that, I'm going to set both factors equal to 0. And that way, I'll be able to figure out what the roots are. So I'm going to take the x minus 3. I'm going to set that equal to 0. I'm going to solve that. And I'm going to take the x plus 3, set that equal to 0, and solve that. So the first thing I need to do to solve this one is to add 3 to both sides. Now once I do that, I'm going to get x is equal to 0 plus 3, which is 3. So that's one of my roots. But to solve this equation, I'm going to have to subtract 3 on both sides. And when I do that, I get 0 minus 3, and that's going to be negative 3. So that's going to be my other root. So now that I've circled the roots, what I can do now is I can do something called interval testing. So to do that, I'm going to take a number line, and I'm going to draw it, and I'm going to take my roots and put them on the line. So I'm going to put the negative 3 on the left side, and the positive 3 is going to go on the right side. Now, in the middle, we're going to have a 0, but that's not going to be one of the roots. And we only want to put the roots on the number line. Now, if I was able to find the roots, I know that if I plug in negative 3 into this equation right here, I'm going to get a 0. So I'm going to put zeros above the negative 3 and the positive 3. And that's going to help me out when I do my interval testing. So now, what I want to do is I want to choose some numbers that help me to figure out if this is going to be greater than 0 or less than 0. So what number lies between negative 3 and positive 3? Well, 0 is an easy number to test. So I'm going to use yellow for this, because this is going to be a number that is actually inside the interval that I want to test. So between negative 3 and 3, I have a 0, and now what I want to do is plug that into my top inequality or the factored form of it. So if I do that, I get 0 squared minus 9 if I plug that into this top inequality. And when I do that, I get 0 squared, which is 0, and 0 minus 9 is negative 9. That's a negative number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a negative sign right here on the interval. So that's going to be my first interval that I want to test. Now I want to choose a number that is bigger than 3. Well, what number is bigger than 3? A 4. That's an easy number to test because it's a whole number. So let's let x be 4 and see what we get. Well, when I do that, I'm going to plug in 4 for x up here. And I get 4 squared minus 9. So to do that, I'm going to square the 4. 4 times 4 is 16. And I need to bring over the minus 9. And 16 minus 9 is going to give me a 7. That's a positive number. So since that's positive, I need to put a plus sign right here where the 4 is. So what this tells me is everything that's bigger than 3 is going to yield a positive result. And anything between -3 and +3 is going to yield a negative result. Now the last interval that I want to test is the numbers that are smaller or less than the -3. So what number is less than -3? Well, I always like to test whole numbers, so let's choose -4. We can test that next. So if I let x be -4, I'm going to have to put -4 squared minus 9. So -4 times -4 is +16. And if I subtract 9 from that, I'm going to get the same result as I did before, a +7. So that means I can put a positive sign right here above the -4. So there we go. This is called interval testing. And we typically do this when we want to figure out if a given result is going to be positive, negative, or 0 on a number line. Okay, so back to the question, how does interval testing help us solve this? Well, notice that we have a greater than or equal to symbol. So we need to choose a greater than 0, which is going to be the positive result, or it could be equal to 0, which is what happens when we're on the roots, -3 and 3. So which intervals are positive? Everything that's smaller than -3, so we could say x is less than or equal to -3, or we can choose this plus sign right here, which means any number that's bigger than 3 is going to yield a positive result. So I could choose x is greater than or equal to +3. And there we go. That's our solution. Now another way that we can write this solution is in interval notation. So if we wanted to write the interval that corresponds to x is less than or equal to -3, we would have to write it as -∞ all the way to -3. And since we have that equal to sign under there, we need to give it a closed bracket. And then we want to use the set union symbol to also include this next interval. X is greater than or equal to 3. So for this, I'm going to have to use a closed bracket on the 3 and then +∞ with a parentheses after that. So we always use parentheses when we use a -∞ or a +∞. And that is quadratic inequalities. And I hope that helps.